Please subscribe, like and share this content. It means a lot to us. Thank you in advance.
To U.S. Code Chapter 17A, Congressional Budget and Fiscal Operation. To U.S. Code Subchapter I, Congressional Budget Process. To U.S. Code Paragraph 643, Determinations and Points of Order. A. Budget Committee determinations for purposes of this subchapter and subchapter 2, the levels of new budget authority, outlays, direct spending, new entitlement authority, and revenues for a fiscal year shall be determined on the basis of estimates made by the Committee on the Budget of the House of Representatives or the Senate, as applicable. B. Discretionary spending. Point of order in Senate. 1. In general, except as otherwise provided in this subsection, it shall not be in order in the Senate to consider any bill or resolution, or amendment, motion, or conference report on that bill or resolution that would exceed any of the discretionary spending limits in Section 251C of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985, to U.S.C. 901C. 2. Exceptions. This subsection shall not apply if a declaration of war by the Congress is in effect or if a joint resolution pursuant to Section 258 of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985, to U.S.C. 907A, has been enacted. C. Maximum deficit amount. Point of order in Senate. It shall not be in order in the Senate to consider any concurrent resolution on the budget for a fiscal year, or to consider any amendment to that concurrent resolution, or to consider a conference report on that concurrent resolution, if 1. The level of total outlays for the first fiscal year set forth in that concurrent resolution or conference report exceeds, or 2. The adoption of that amendment would result in a level of total outlays for that fiscal year that exceeds the recommended level of federal revenues for that fiscal year by an amount that is greater than the maximum deficit amount, if any, specified in the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985 for that fiscal year. D. Timing of points of order in Senate. A point of order under this act may not be raised against a bill, resolution, amendment, motion, or conference report while an amendment or motion, the adoption of which would remedy the violation of this act, is pending before the Senate. E. Points of order in Senate against amendments between houses. Each provision of this act that establishes a point of order against an amendment also establishes a point of order in the Senate against an amendment between the houses. If a point of order under this act is raised in the Senate against an amendment between the houses and the point of order is sustained, the effect shall be the same as if the Senate had disagreed to the amendment. F. Effect of point of order in Senate. In the Senate, if a point of order under this act against a bill or resolution is sustained, the presiding officer shall then recommit the bill or resolution to the committee of appropriate jurisdiction for further consideration. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 644, Extraneous Matter and Reconciliation Legislation. A. In general, when the Senate is considering a reconciliation bill or a reconciliation resolution pursuant to Section 641 of this title, whether that bill or resolution originated in the Senate or the House or Section 970 of this title, upon a point of order being made by any senator against material extraneous to the instructions to a committee which is contained in any title or provision of the bill or resolution or offered as an amendment to the bill or resolution, and the point of order is sustained by the chair, any part of said title or provision that contains material extraneous to the instructions to said committee as defined in subsection B shall be deemed stricken from the bill and may not be offered as an amendment from the floor. B. Extraneous provisions. 1a. Except as provided in paragraph 2, a provision of a reconciliation bill or reconciliation resolution considered pursuant to Section 641 of this title shall be considered extraneous if such provision does not produce a change in outlays or revenues, including changes in outlays and revenues brought about by changes in the terms and conditions under which outlays are made or revenues are required to be collected, but a provision in which outlay decreases or revenue increases exactly offset outlay increases or revenue decreases shall not be considered extraneous by virtue of this subparagraph. B. Any provision producing an increase in outlays or decrease in revenues shall be considered extraneous if the net effect of provisions reported by the committee reporting the title containing the provision is that the committee fails to achieve its reconciliation instructions. C. A provision that is not in the jurisdiction of the committee with jurisdiction over said title or provision shall be considered extraneous. D. A provision shall be considered extraneous if it produces changes in outlays or revenues which are merely incidental to the non-budgetary components of the provision. E. A provision shall be considered to be extraneous if it increases, or would increase, net outlays, or if it decreases, or would decrease, revenues during a fiscal year after the fiscal years covered by such reconciliation bill or reconciliation resolution, and such increases or decreases are greater than outlay reductions or revenue increases resulting from other provisions in such title in such year. And F. A provision shall be considered extraneous if it violates Section 641G of this title. 2. A Senate-originated provision shall not be considered extraneous under paragraph 1a if the chairman and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Budget and the chairman and ranking minority member of the committee which reported the provision certify that a. The provision provision mitigates direct effects clearly attributable to a provision changing outlays or revenues and both provisions together produce a net reduction in the deficit. B. The provision will result in a substantial reduction in outlays or a substantial increase in revenues during fiscal years after the fiscal years covered by the reconciliation bill or reconciliation resolution. C. A reduction of outlays or an increase in revenues is likely to occur as a result of the provision, in the event of new regulations authorized by the provision or likely to be proposed, court rulings on pending litigation, or relationships between economic indices and stipulated statutory triggers pertaining to the provision, other than the regulations, court rulings or relationships currently projected by the Congressional Budget Office for scorekeeping purposes, or D. Such provision will be likely to produce a significant reduction in outlays or increase in revenues but, due to insufficient data, such reduction or increase cannot be reliably estimated. 3. A provision reported by a committee shall not be considered extraneous under paragraph 1c if a. The provision is an integral part of a provision or title, which if introduced as a bill or resolution would be referred to such committee, and the provision sets forth the procedure to carry out or implement the substantive provisions that were reported and which fall within the jurisdiction of such committee, or b. The provision states an exception to, or a special application of, the general provision or title of which it is a part, and such general provision or title if introduced as a bill or resolution would be referred to such committee. C. Extraneous materials upon the reporting or discharge of a reconciliation bill or resolution pursuant to Section 641 of this title in the Senate, and again upon the submission of a conference report on such a reconciliation bill or resolution, the Committee on the Budget of the Senate shall submit for the record a list of material considered to be extraneous under subsections B1A, B1B, and B1E of this section to the instructions of a committee as provided in this section. The inclusion or exclusion of a provision shall not constitute a determination of extraneousness by the presiding officer of the Senate. D. Conference reports. When the Senate is considering a conference report on, or an amendment between the Houses in relation to, a reconciliation bill or reconciliation resolution pursuant to Section 641 of this title, upon 1. A point of order being made by any senator against extraneous material meeting the definition of subsections B1A, B1B, B1D, B1E, or B1F, and 2. Such point of order being sustained, such material contained in such conference report or amendment shall be deemed stricken, and the Senate shall proceed, without intervening action or motion, to consider the question of whether the Senate shall recede from its amendment and concur with a further amendment, or concur in the House amendment with a further amendment, as the case may be, which further amendment shall consist of only that portion of the conference report or House amendment, as the case may be, not so stricken. Any such motion in the Senate shall be debatable for 2 hours. In any case in which such point of order is sustained against the conference report, or Senate amendment derived from such conference report by operation of this subsection, no further amendment shall be in order. E. General point of order. Notwithstanding any other law or rule of the Senate, it shall be in order for a senator to raise a single point of order that several provisions of a bill, resolution, amendment, motion, or conference report violate this section. The presiding officer may sustain the point of order as to some or all of the provisions against which the senator raised the point of order. If the presiding officer so sustains the point of order as to some of the provisions, including provisions of an amendment, motion, or conference report against which the senator raised the point of order, then only those provisions, including provisions of an amendment, motion, or conference report against which the presiding officer sustains the point of order shall be deemed stricken pursuant to this section. Before the presiding officer rules on such a point of order, any senator may move to waive such a point of order as it applies to some or all of the provisions against which the point of order was raised. Such a motion to waive is amendable in accordance with the rules and precedents of the Senate. After the presiding officer rules on such a point of order, any senator may appeal the ruling of the presiding officer on such a point of order as it applies to some or all of the provisions on which the presiding officer ruled. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 645, Adjustments. A. Adjustments after the reporting of a bill or joint resolution or the offering of an amendment thereto or the submission of a conference report thereon, the chairman of the Committee on the Budget of the House of Representatives or the Senate may make appropriate budgetary adjustments of new budget authority and the outlays flowing therefrom in the same amount as required by Section 901B of this title. B. Application of adjustments. The adjustments made pursuant to subsection A for legislation shall 1. Apply while that legislation is under consideration, 2. Take effect upon the enactment of that legislation, and 3. Be published in the Congressional Record as soon as practicable. C. Reporting revised sublocations following any adjustment made under subsection A. The Committees on Appropriations of the Senate and the House of Representatives may report appropriately revised sublocations under Section 633B of this title to carry out this section. D. Emergencies in the House of Representatives. 1. In the House of Representatives, if a reported bill or joint resolution, or amendment thereto or conference report thereon, contains a provision providing new budget authority and outlays or reducing revenue, and a designation of such provision as an emergency requirement pursuant to 901b2a(1) of this title, the chair of the Committee on the Budget of the House of Representatives shall not count the budgetary effects of such provision for purposes of this subchapter and subchapter 2 and the rules of the House of Representatives. 2a. In the House of Representatives, a proposal to strike a designation under paragraph 1 shall be excluded from an evaluation of budgetary effects for purposes of this subchapter and subchapter 2 and the rules of the House of Representatives. B. An amendment offered under subparagraph A that also proposes to reduce each amount appropriated or otherwise made available by the pending measure that is not required to be appropriated or otherwise made available shall be in order at any point in the reading of the pending measure. E. Senate point of order against an emergency designation. 1. In general, when the Senate is considering a bill, resolution, amendment, motion, amendment between the houses, or conference report, if a point of order is made by a senator against an emergency designation in that measure, that provision making such a designation shall be stricken from the measure and may not be offered as an amendment from the floor. 2. Supermajority waiver and appeals. A. Waiver paragraph 1 may be waived or suspended in the Senate only by an affirmative vote of 3/5 of the members, duly chosen and sworn. B. Appeals in the Senate from the decisions of the chair relating to any provision of this subsection shall be limited to 1 hour, to be equally divided between, and controlled by, the appellant and the manager of the bill or joint resolution, as the case may be. An affirmative vote of 3/5 of the members of the Senate, duly chosen and sworn, shall be required to sustain an appeal of the ruling of the chair on a point of order raised under this subsection. 3. Definition of an emergency designation for purposes of paragraph 1. A provision shall be considered an emergency designation if it designates any item pursuant to section 901b2ai of this title. 4. Form of the point of order. A point of order under paragraph 1 may be raised by a senator as provided in section 644e of this title. 5. Conference reports. When the Senate is considering a conference report on, or an amendment between the houses in relation to, a bill, upon a point of order being made by any senator pursuant to this section, and such point of order being sustained, such material contained in such conference report shall be deemed stricken, and the Senate shall proceed to consider the question of whether the Senate shall recede from its amendment and concur with a further amendment, or concur in the House amendment with a further amendment, as the case may be, which further amendment shall consist of only that portion of the conference report or House amendment, as the case may be, not so stricken. Any such motion in the Senate shall be debatable. In any case in which such point of order is sustained against a conference report, or Senate amendment derived from such conference report by operation of this subsection, no further amendment shall be in order. F. Enforcement of discretionary spending caps. It shall not be in order in the House of Representatives or the Senate to consider any bill, joint resolution, amendment, motion, or conference report that would cause the discretionary spending limits as set forth in section 901 of this title to be exceeded. G. Adjustment for Reemployment Services and Eligibility Assessments. 1. In general, A. Adjustments if the Committee on Appropriations of either House reports an appropriation measure for any of fiscal years 2022 through 2027 that provides budget authority for grants under Section 506 of Title 42, or if a conference committee submits a conference report thereon, the chairman of the Committee on the Budget of the House of Representatives or the Senate shall make the adjustments referred to in subparagraph B to reflect the additional new budget authority provided for such grants in that measure or conference report and the outlays resulting therefrom, consistent with subparagraph D. B. Types of adjustments. The adjustments referred to in this subparagraph consist of adjustments to I. The discretionary spending limits for the fiscal year as set forth in the most recently adopted concurrent resolution on the budget. 2. The allocations to the Committees on Appropriations of the Senate and the House of Representatives for the fiscal year under Section 633A of this title. And 3. The appropriate budget aggregates for the fiscal year in the most recently adopted concurrent resolution on the budget. C. Enforcement. The adjusted discretionary spending limits, allocations, and aggregates under this paragraph shall be considered the appropriate limits, allocations, and aggregates for purposes of congressional enforcement of this Act and concurrent budget resolutions under this Act. D. Limitation. No adjustment may be made under this subsection in excess of I. For fiscal year 2022, $133 million. 2. For fiscal year 2023, $258 million. 3. For fiscal year 2024, $433 million. IV. For fiscal year 2025, $533 million. V. For fiscal year 2026, $608 million. And VI. For fiscal year 2027, $633 million. E. Definition as used in this subsection. The term, additional new budget authority means the amount provided for a fiscal year, in excess of $117 million, in an appropriation measure or conference report, as the case may be, and specified to pay for grants to states under Section 506 of Title 42. 2. Report on 633B level. Following any adjustment made under paragraph 1, the Committees on Appropriations of the Senate and the House of Representatives may report appropriately revised suballocations pursuant to Section 633B of this title to carry out this subsection. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 645A, effect of adoption of Special Order of Business in House of Representatives. For purposes of a reported bill or joint resolution considered in the House of Representatives pursuant to a special order of business, the term, as reported in this subchapter or subchapter 2 shall be considered to refer to the text made in order as an original bill or joint resolution for the purpose of amendment or to the text on which the previous question is ordered directly to passage, as the case may be. In the case of a reported bill or joint resolution considered pursuant to a special order of business, a point of order under Section 634 of this title shall be determined on the basis of the text made in order as an original bill or joint resolution for the purpose of amendment or to the text on which the previous question is ordered directly to passage, as the case may be.